Every trend cycle tells you to throw out what you just bought and buy something new. But what if not buying is the new flex? By now, we've seen it a million times, right? At any given moment, an influencer is unboxing a fresh haul of clothes, shoes, skincare, and other so-called must-have products added to an ever-growing collection. The packages keep coming, the cycle never stops. But something unexpected is happening. Consuming less is actually gaining traction. Against the backdrop of rising rent, near impossible home ownership, a reported 57% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, and an ever-expanding wealth gap, some millennials and Gen Z are rejecting the pressure to shop endlessly, buying what they actually need instead of stockpiling on trend cycles. Enter Underconsumption Core and No Buy 2025. The former being a trend aimed at celebrating and repurposing what you already have instead of buying more, and the latter being aimed at only spending money on essentials and occasional treats. But are Underconsumption Core and No Buys just fleeting trends that are doomed to fail? Or are they a sign that consumers are finally waking up and rejecting overconsumption and hyperconsumerism once and for all? Let's unpack what's really going on. For years, it seems that overconsumption has become the cultural norm, at least on the internet. And we haven't hesitated to talk about that on this channel. Social media turned shopping into a personality trait, glorifying massive hauls, skincare collections the size of department stores, Stanley Cup collections, Sephora hauls, you name it, we've talked about it. Influencers have turned it into an endless cycle of buying just for the sake of buying. They've made shopping a hobby, an aesthetic, a status symbol. But cracks in this narrative are starting to show because we're all experiencing influencer fatigue. We've seen the same patterns. We've been hearing the same grating vocal fry for years of influencers talking about how obsessed they are with every product. We've lived through constant scandals of influencers lying about the products that they promote. Simply put, we're tired of the bullshit. And all of this has led to the rise of underconsumption core and no-buy trends. Unlike other core trends, underconsumption core is fundamentally anti-aesthetic. It's about repurposing your not-so-aesthetic items and holding on to them for as long as possible and not buying new items because although the form might leave a little to be desired, the function is still working. We're seeing a trend of young people choosing functionality over aesthetics. We're seeing people embrace minimalism. We're seeing people who are promoting mindful spending. As someone who personally participated in underconsumption core, I made one reel on Instagram for it. I can say all of these things are net positives that I completely support. But this shift is not happening in a vacuum. It's taking place against the backdrop of widespread economic insecurity. It's really not hard to consume less when you have less money to consume with. Wages are not keeping up with the cost of living, as I've talked about countless times on this channel recently. So overconsumption has been impossible for a lot of everyday people for quite a while now. There's also, of course, student debt that a lot of millennials and Gen Zers are grappling with. So at this point, the hyperconsumerism that influencers promote has never felt more out of touch. That being said, it's important to note that the internet is a very, very, very large place. On my side of the algorithm, it's giving people talking about their economic insecurity. On my side of the algorithm, it's giving F capitalism. On my side of the algorithm, it's giving sustainability. That's what's being serviced to me because that is the kind of content that I have engaged with. But on the other side of the algorithm, the other side of the internet, the I'm just a girl, shopping is my entire personality, industrial complex side of the internet, things look a little bit different. Many influencers cannot stop shopping because their entire brand hinges upon overconsumption. They can't stop promoting it because what are they gonna do? I don't know, find an actual personality that doesn't revolve around shopping? That's so hard. Read a book? You're asking for too much. Class consciousness? You're asking for too much now. So instead, in response to the rise of trends like underconsumption core, you know what they're doing? They've created overconsumption core. You know, they've participated in overconsumption, of course, for many years, but now they're actually being defiant and blatant about the fact that their goal is to overconsume. They're saying we've seen the criticism and we're doubling down. We've heard you tell us how we're ruining the planet. We've heard you tell us how out of touch we are. We've heard you tell us about the labor exploitation that's required to sustain this shopping addiction. And they're responding by saying,
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Let me tell you something.
We don't care.
Jerry.
with captions like, overconsumption isn't normal, but neither am I. They're boasting about their drawers filled with unopened products, boasting about buying new skincare when they don't need it, boasting about their absurd amount of makeup that they probably will never use up just because it's fun to buy. They're proudly showcasing the fact that they're buying new perfumes just because the bottle is cute. They're boasting about the fact that they have 10 necklaces that are exactly the same. They're proud of the fact that they perpetually always have shopping bags laying around and they're always buying new clothes. Or how about this inspiring TikTok from a self-proclaimed, quote, oldest daughter of immigrants that finally got her own money and can now participate in overconsumption? Because nothing says cashing in on the American dream like a shopping addiction. Yes, the best way to assimilate into American culture is to prop up and obsess over the very brands that manipulate and exploit and abuse immigrants, the very people that look like you, just so that you can have a shopping addiction. Yay! If you ask me, that's the good old American way. And you can find countless others like this under the hashtag overconsumptioncore on TikTok or wherever you get your social media. And the recent Poppi vending machines controversy also proves that influencers still do not care about criticisms about them being out of touch and over-consuming. Poppi, a prebiotic soda brand, decided that the best way to market themselves during the week of the Super Bowl was to send influencers full-size, fully stocked vending machines. Yes, actual vending machines delivered straight to their homes. And influencers posted videos showing off the lavish gift, filming themselves basking in the absurdity of receiving a literal storefront fixture as a PR package. Yet another reminder of how out of touch influencers are and how they double down on their overconsumption, even in the face of widespread criticism. And I think it goes further than even just a PR stunt. I think it's a blatant display of class separation. It sends the message of like, you can't even afford groceries, but look at me. I'm having brands send me an entire vending machine to my house. Overconsumption as a spectacle, right? Some of these influencers said that they didn't get to keep the machines, but either way, I want to ask you a question. How many of you have had a brand send a vending machine to your home? It's the fact that you even have access to be able to have a vending machine sent to your home by a corporation. It already is sending the message loud and clear. It's just a way to show you that they live in a completely different economic reality than you do. And so influencers are very much digging their heels in. So as much as we would like to think that the tide is turning away from overconsumption and towards underconsumption, in many ways the pendulum is swinging in the opposite direction towards overconsumption. And the rise of overconsumption core as a performative trend, as a way to display one's wealth in times of economic insecurity, isn't new. During the Gilded Age, which occurred from 1865 to 1898, robber barons like Andrew Carnegie, J.D. Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan built their wealth on the backs of immigrants. While the immigrants lived in squalor, lived in poverty, this was a common practice during the Gilded Age. Working families crammed into single-room apartments. And while this was happening, the elite were constructing palatial mansions. They were riding around on their horses and carriages, having these luxurious dinners that were photographed and featured in magazines at the time and newspapers. Their wealth was visible in marble staircases, elaborate art collections, private opera houses that they would visit. And this same phenomenon happened during COVID. While millions lost their jobs and lives, billionaires saw a surge in their wealth. And luxury consumption amongst the elite skyrocketed. The 400 richest Americans added $4.5 trillion to their wealth, which was a 40% rise from the previous year. And super yacht sales surged by 46%. They were investing all of their stocks into the companies that they knew would profit off of the pandemic, and they got richer as a result. So whether it's billionaires getting rich off of a global tragedy, or rich tycoons gallivanting around town with their wealth on full display while their employees suffer in poverty, or influencers ostentatiously showing off their wealth for all of social media to behold, even in the face of criticism of why their lifestyles are out of touch, all of this points to a larger issue A lack of empathy under American individualism. Influencers very much know what they're doing at this point. They're showing us that they've seen the criticism and they do not care. It really puts into focus how being an influencer is a highly political thing. Even though influencers are not blatantly political in the things that they say or do, ostensibly they're apolitical, but they're very much aware of what they're doing on a political level. They understand the politics of class. They understand that they want to be as rich as possible, and their job is to make that lifestyle as aspirational as possible to the general public. That is a very political act. Just as the rich and elite of the Gilded Age understood when they were riding around in their horses and carriages, when they were gallivanting all over town, showing off their wealth is predicated off of them having and someone else not having and someone else aspiring to their life and a hierarchical aspiration. The whole point of being a lifestyle influencer is to promote a very specific lifestyle. This is why you don't see lifestyle influencers who are plumbers, who are like, get ready with me to go snake a toilet. That's not particularly glamorous. It's not particularly aesthetic. By the way, I'm sure that there are creators, people on TikTok, like plumbers, who might post themselves doing such tasks, but they're not getting brand deals with Sephora. You're not going to see a lifestyle influencer who's like, get ready with me to go load some bread into a truck and drop it off at the local Walmart. The whole point of a lot of these lifestyle influencers' jobs is to make you aspire to a life of luxury and exclusion. They're showing you a day in the life of them waking up and going to Erewhon to get groceries, and then going to Sephora to get some skincare and makeup items, and then going to Crumble Cookies to get some gourmet cookies. In a world that's so pressed for time, the hook is them showing you their life of leisure and showing you the things that a normal person doesn't have time or money to do. And so now you're seeing a lot of these influencers doubling down on their consumption as a result of being criticized. It's one thing to overconsume when you don't know any better. Like a lot of us in 2014 were rushing to buy every eyeshadow palette, every Forever 21 crop top, every emoji sweater, and Galaxy leggings. Like, we were young and naive and did not know any better. But these influencers at this point know better, and they're telling you that they know better, but they're not gonna do better. And this is why I say it's a sign of a lack of empathy under American individualism and under capitalism. Because how can you look at images like this and this and this and say to yourself, I'm gonna overconsume more and more, and I don't care. Just because these perfume bottles look pretty, I'm gonna keep buying them. Just because these clothes look pretty, I'm gonna keep buying them, despite being faced with images like that.
I work there until 10 p.m. Often I go to bed at 1 or 2 a.m. Mum gets angry because since I started working in the factory, I can't sleep well anymore.
What is it about American culture that makes people so desensitized, so self-absorbed, that even when they know that their behaviors directly harm other people, they don't care? And I'm not talking about the ways in which we are forced to participate in capitalism and forced to shop at certain corporations. I'm talking about going beyond your basic necessities and over-consuming, despite knowing what you know. These products, having all of these items is only desirable when other people can't have them. Something is only considered a luxury if it's not accessible to everyone. It's the reason why it's controversial in the United States to say, I believe that everyone should have access to food, clean water, housing, a livable wage. Yes, even the person who's flipping burgers at Burger King. Yeah, controversial. Because we believe that certain people should have and other people shouldn't, because of American individualism, because American culture largely breeds people who desire to hoard resources, who desire to maintain social hierarchies. And it shows up in every facet of American life. It's the culture that tells us that our possessions are only as good as who else can't have them. This is a deliberate feature of a system that thrives on exploitation. And here's where my critique of underconsumption core and no-buy trends lies. I think that it becomes problematic when underconsumption core and no-buys are framed as personal choices rather than collective action that's necessary in order to curb exploitation of people, of the planet. I worry that anti-consumption simply as a trend dilutes the necessary political framework that it's going to take to wholly reject all of the systems that make overconsumption possible. I worry about reducing a systemic issue to a hashtag-friendly trend. I also think that these kinds of trends also romanticize things that low-income people have been doing for decades, out of necessity. For working class people, for poor people, stretching out resources, repurposing resources is nothing new. It's nothing trendy. In fact, it's things that they probably got bullied for. It's a survival strategy. I know for me, those scholastic book fairs, that was the beginning of my class consciousness, because boy, did I feel insecure because I never had money to buy all those books and all those trinkets. I had at best maybe $20 to $30, which is why I used to steal from the book fair. Am I admitting that on the internet? Yeah, okay, I am. Follow me on Patreon. Maybe I'll do a story time about that. Allegedly, the feds are watching. Is that a crime to steal from the book fair? Whatever. This was decades ago. I think the statute of limitations has run out. But in all seriousness, poor people have been cutting their toothpaste open and scraping the last drop of toothpaste out of that tube since time immemorial. Poor people have been limiting their purchases to essentials since time immemorial. Positioning underconsumption core as a choice or as a trend, it erases the reality that for a lot of people, it's never been optional to underconsume. What happens when someone's already been buying only essentials and has had a very frugal budget and is still struggling to survive? Now, I do want to say that I think that it's a good thing that we're presenting normal consumption and repurposing things and reusing things as something that is actually aspirational for the internet, because I do believe that you have to speak the language of young people. And if we didn't call it something, that it wouldn't have gained the traction that it gained. And the fact that the mainstream media is talking about it, the fact that it's raising awareness to this level is a really good thing to get it in the cultural zeitgeist. However, I think that without a clear political framework, it does run the risk of fizzling out, and it runs the risk of romanticizing something that is not a choice for people who are poor. So if you're operating on the framework that poor people are only poor because they're overspending and making bad decisions, then you might think that the only answer is doing a no-buy or just doing underconsumption core. But if you realize that the vast majority of people are poor because of low wages, unaffordable housing, inflation, the social stratification facilitated by capitalism, you realize that no buys and underconsumption core are literally just being poor. And you run the risk of reducing the underconsumption problem to just don't buy, instead of corporations should not be overproducing. Instead of corporations should not be manipulating people to buy things that they don't need. Instead of, if our baseline social needs are met, we wouldn't be seeking the dopamine that maybe requires some people to spend above their means. Voting with your dollars is an important strategy, but it should be grounded in a political framework, one that fundamentally rejects all oppressive systems that make overconsumption possible. Be it labor exploitation, environmental degradation, racial capitalism, imperialism, sexism, etc. This is why minimalism became largely co-opted by corporations who started just greenwashing, which is a practice of using opaque, seemingly sustainable buzzwords, although the practices to create the products were anything but sustainable. Movements are easier to be co-opted when they don't have a clear political framework that they're operating from. So this is why we need to have a framework that focuses around tackling low wages and economic precarity that makes people seek temporary comfort through consumption. We need to be tackling the lack of class consciousness that makes people want to aspire to the lifestyles of the rich, rather than advocating for wealth redistribution. We need to be tackling corporate overproduction and psychological marketing tactics that make people feel inadequate and like they have to keep buying. And so despite the rise of underconsumption core and no buys, I don't think that we've yet reached a critical mass of people who are approaching it through a collective liberation framework. Overconsumption is still very much being glorified, and there's a lot of work to do. And so that's why if underconsumption core and no buys are to have a real impact, they have to move beyond individual consumer choices and organize on a larger scale. It has to be about more than just, I'm going to spend less money. It also has to be about, what do I want this world to look like for me and for the people that come after me? It has to be grounded in humanity. It has to be grounded in a politic that seeks to dismantle oppressive, discriminatory systems. The last thing I'll say is I think that underconsumption core and no buys are great ideas. But if they're to have any kind of lasting impact beyond just a fleeting trend, they're going to have to embrace the historical reality that goes beyond just personal choices. It's only then that it can transcend beyond just being a moment into a full-blown movement. And that's all I've got. Let me know your thoughts though in the comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts about underconsumption core and no buys. What are you trying to cut down on and reduce in 2025? I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. And if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, because if you watched it to the end, I would assume that you probably liked it. And if you really liked it, then definitely hit that subscribe button. I have plenty more content just like this. And besides all that, you can follow me on my social media profiles, which you can find down here, as well as my Patreon, where you can contribute for as little as $1.50 a month or as much as $5 a month, where you can help to support my work. Besides all that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you all next time.